There's a particular kind of condescension that comes with family gatherings when you're considered the unsuccessful one. It's in every sympathetic head tilt, every careful question about how work is going, every comparison to your more accomplished relatives. I'd been experiencing it for 7 years now, ever since I'd come home for Christmas at age 26 and told my family I'd taken a job working at a bank in D.C. They heard bank teller. I didn't correct them. The truth was significantly more complex, but I'd learned early in my career that some explanations weren't worth the effort. Especially with family members who'd already decided who you were and what you were capable of. My family, the Chens, were high achievers in the traditional sense. My older brother Robert was a neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins. My sister Linda was a partner at a major law firm in New York. My cousin Mike, who never missed an opportunity to remind everyone of his success, ran a regional chain of luxury car dealerships that he'd inherited from his father and somehow took full credit for building. And then there was me, surgeon. The family underachiever who worked at a bank. This particular family reunion was being held at my Uncle Tom's estate in Potomac, Maryland. The house was massive, all stone and glass overlooking 3 acres of manicured lawn. 50-plus relatives had gathered for the annual Chin family summer barbecue, and I'd arrived late after a particularly grueling week. I'd hoped to slip in quietly, but Mike spotted me immediately from across the patio. "Sarah. There she is." He called out loudly enough for half the gathering to turn and look. "How's the banking world treating you? Still counting those dollar bills?" Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. I smiled and made my way toward the drink table. "Hi, Mike. The work keeps me busy." "I bet it does," he said, following me. He was holding court now, enjoying his audience. All those deposits to process, withdrawals to handle. Very important work. "Someone has to do it," I said mildly, pouring myself an iced tea. Robert appeared at my elbow, his expression a mixture of pity and concern. "Sarah, we need to talk about your career trajectory. You're 33 now. Don't you think it's time to consider moving up? Maybe going back to school? An MBA could really help you advance beyond teller work." "I appreciate the concern. I'm serious," he pressed. "Linda and I were talking. We could help you. Get you into a good program, maybe even cover some tuition. You have potential, you just need direction." I took a long drink of tea. I'd had this conversation in various forms at least a dozen times over the years. "That's very generous, but I'm fine where I am." "Fine isn't great though, is it?" Linda had joined us, her designer dress and Cartier watch catching the sunlight. "You should want more for yourself. We all started somewhere, but we pushed ourselves to achieve. That's the Chin way." "The Chin way," I repeated neutrally. "Exactly," Mike jumped in. He was really warming to his subject now, several other relatives gathering around to listen. "Take me for example. I could have stayed comfortable, just managed what Dad built. But I expanded, 6 new dealerships in 3 years, revenue up 40%. That's ambition. That's what separates successful people from people who stay in entry-level positions their whole lives." Aunt Wei, my mother's sister, patted my hand sympathetically. "Don't feel bad, Sarah. Not everyone can be a high achiever. Some people are meant for simpler work. There's no shame in that." "Absolutely no shame," Uncle James agreed. "The world needs bank tellers. It's honest work. Maybe not prestigious, but honest." I nodded slowly. "Honest work is important. Although," my mother said, appearing with a plate of food, "I do wish you'd consider Robert's offer. Or at least try to move into bank management. Your cousin Tony manages a Bank of America branch. I could ask him for advice on how you might work your way up." "Mom, I really don't need." "She's being defensive," Linda observed to the group. "That's what happens when people are insecure about their career choices. Sarah, we're trying to help you." "I understand that. Do you though?" Mike was fully in performance mode now. "Because from where I'm standing, you've been in the same position for 7 years. That's not a career, that's a holding pattern. At some point you have to ask yourself, am I going anywhere or am I just treading water?" My phone buzzed in my pocket. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. I ignored it. "Maybe banking just isn't your calling," Aunt Wei suggested. "Have you thought about other fields? Retail management? Human resources? Something with a clearer advancement path." "The problem is vision," Mike declared. "Successful people see the big picture. They set goals. They make things happen. They don't just clock in and clock out at some branch office, counting other people's money. My phone began ringing. I glanced at the screen. Federal Reserve Chairman Powell, urgent. The conversation around me continued, but I'd stopped listening. Chairman Powell didn't call on weekends unless something was seriously wrong. "Excuse me," I said, already walking toward the house. "I need to take this." "See," I heard Mike say behind me. "Can't even enjoy a family barbecue without her boss calling." That's what happens in those low-level service jobs. No work-life balance, no respect. I answered as I stepped into Uncle Tom's study, closing the door behind me. "Director Chin." "Sarah, I apologize for interrupting your weekend." Chairman Jerome Powell's voice was tense, controlled. "We have a situation. The cryptocurrency market is in free fall. We're looking at a potential $2 trillion collapse. It's spreading to traditional banking faster than our models predicted. I need you to activate the emergency stabilization protocols immediately." My mind shifted instantly into crisis mode. 7 years as Director of Financial Stability at the Federal Reserve had trained me for exactly this scenario. What's the contagion vector? 3 major banks have significant exposure through unhedged crypto derivatives. If they fail, we're looking at cascading defaults across the entire financial system. It could make 2008 look minor. Current liquidity positions? Deteriorating by the hour. The Treasury Secretary is briefing the President now. "We need your crisis team assembled and recommendations ready for the emergency Fed meeting in 2 hours." I was already opening my encrypted laptop, pulling up the secure Federal Reserve systems. "I'm activating the task force now. I'll need access to all bank exposure reports and real-time market data." "You have full authorization." "Sarah, I don't need to tell you how serious this is. We have a very narrow window to prevent a complete financial meltdown." "Understood, Mr. Chairman. I'll have preliminary recommendations within 90 minutes. This is why you're the Director of Financial Stability. Your team is the best in the world at this. I'm counting on you. We won't let you down." I hung up and immediately began executing the crisis protocols I'd helped develop. First, I messaged my deputy director. Code red. "Activate full crisis team. Emergency Fed meeting in 120 minutes. Then I opened the secure portal that gave me real-time access to the balance sheets of every major financial institution in the United States. The numbers were worse than I'd expected. Much worse. 3 banks were critically exposed. If I didn't act fast, they'd fail by Monday morning. And they were large enough to trigger the exact kind of systemic collapse that my entire career had been devoted to preventing. I pulled up the emergency lending facilities, the overnight repo operations, the discount window provisions. I had the authority to inject liquidity directly into the banking system. Up to $500 billion if necessary. But it had to be done strategically, carefully, with surgical precision. My phone buzzed with incoming messages from my crisis team, all of them responding within minutes despite it being Saturday afternoon. These were the best financial stability experts in the world, and we trained for this exact scenario. 20 minutes into my analysis, someone knocked on the study door. I ignored it. Knocked again. "Sarah." It was Robert's voice. "You've been in there for a while. Everything okay?" "I'm working. I'll be out when I can." "Working? On the weekend?" "Sarah, that's exactly what we're talking about. Your job is consuming your life. No bank teller position should require." "Robert, I really can't talk right now. This is urgent." I heard murmuring outside the door, then Linda's voice. "She's avoiding us. This is what happens when people can't face the truth about their failures." I turned back to my screens, running simulations. If I authorized emergency lending to Bank of First, it would stabilize their position but might spook the markets about banks B and C. If I announced a broad liquidity injection, it might signal panic. The sequencing had to be perfect. My phone rang again. This time it was the Treasury Secretary. "Director Chin, the President wants your assessment." "How bad is this?" "Potentially catastrophic if we don't act in the next few hours. I'm modeling 3 scenarios now. In the worst case, we're looking at the failure of at least 3 major banks by Monday, with cascading effects throughout the financial system." "Can you prevent it?" "Yes, but I need authorization to implement aggressive interventions. We're talking about potentially $400 billion in emergency lending facilities, plus coordinated action with other central banks. You have whatever authority you need. The president is prepared to make a national address if necessary. He wants your team leading the response. Tell him we're on it. I'll have detailed recommendations within the hour. 45 minutes later, I'd built a comprehensive stabilization plan. It involved coordinated lending to the 3 vulnerable banks, a public statement from the Fed assuring markets that we had the situation under control, and activation of currency swap lines with the European Central Bank and Bank of Japan to prevent international contagion. It was aggressive, it was expensive, and it would work. I began the secure video conference with Chairman Powell, the other Fed governors, and my entire crisis team. For the next hour, we refined the plan, stress-tested the assumptions, and prepared the public messaging. Brilliant work, Sarah, Chairman Powell said as we finalized the details. This is exactly why you're the Director of Financial Stability. Your team just prevented a potential global financial crisis. We're not done yet, Mr. Chairman. Implementation is critical. Agreed. I'm authorizing everything in your plan. The lending facilities will be active within the hour. We'll make the public announcement at 5 p.m. Eastern. And Sarah? Thank you. The country owes you a debt they'll never know about. As the video conference ended, I realized I'd been working for nearly 2 hours. My family was probably wondering where I'd disappeared to. I saved all my files, encrypted my laptop, and stepped out of the study. The barbecue was still going strong on the patio. I could see Mike holding court by the grill, probably still pontificating about business success and career ambition. I walked back outside. Several relatives turned to look at me. There she is. Mike called out. Done with your very important bank work? Did someone need you to make change or something? Polite laughter. I'd heard variations of this joke for 7 years. Something like that, I said. Sarah's sweetheart. My mother approached me, her face concerned. You look stressed. Is everything all right? Is your boss being difficult? Just a busy day. On a Saturday? Linda shook her head. That's unacceptable. You need to set boundaries. In my law practice, I never let clients interrupt my personal time. Good for you. I'm serious. This is a symptom of being in a low-status position. People don't respect your time because they don't respect your role. If you were in management, you could delegate these weekend emergencies. Robert nodded. She's right. This is exactly what we've been trying to tell you. You need to advocate for yourself, move up, get out of the grunt work. My phone buzzed with a news alert. I glanced at it. Breaking. Federal Reserve announces emergency measures to stabilize financial markets. Within seconds, several other phones around the patio started buzzing with the same alert. Uncle James pulled out his phone and read aloud. The Federal Reserve has implemented comprehensive emergency lending facilities to ensure stability in the banking system following cryptocurrency market volatility. Fed Chair Powell praised the swift action of the Fed's crisis management team. Well, that's concerning, Mike said. Good thing I keep my money diversified. The Fed better know what they're doing. I'm sure they do, I said quietly. Although honestly, he continued, how hard can it be? The Fed just prints money when there's a problem. It's not like they're running actual businesses like some of us. I took a sip of my now warm iced tea. Aunt Wei was reading her phone. It says here that the emergency response was led by the Director of Financial Stability, Sarah Chin. She looked up. That's interesting. Same last name as us. Probably coincidence, Linda said dismissively. Chin is a common name. No, but look. Uncle James had pulled up the Federal Reserve website on his phone. There's a picture. This looks like our Sarah. Several relatives crowded around his phone. There was a long moment of silence. That's not. Mike started, then stopped. Robert grabbed the phone from Uncle James. His face went pale. Sarah Chin, Director of Financial Stability, Federal Reserve System. Appointed at age 26, youngest director in Fed history. Previously served as senior economist at the International Monetary Fund. PhD in economics from MIT, master's from LSE, undergraduate degree from Harvard. He looked up at me. Sarah? What is this? Bio, I said simply. But you said you worked at a bank, my mother said, her voice faint. I do work at a bank. The most important bank in the country. The Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. The Federal Reserve, Linda repeated slowly. You work for the Federal Reserve. I don't just work for it. I'm one of the senior directors. I oversee financial stability for the entire U.S. banking system. Mike's face had gone from tan to grayish. But you said, we all thought you were a bank teller. No, you all assumed I was a bank teller. I said I worked at a bank in D.C. You never asked which bank or what I did there. We asked about your job constantly. Robert protested. You asked if I was still at the bank and I said yes. You asked if the work kept me busy and I said yes. You never once asked what my actual title was or what my responsibilities were. You just assumed. Aunt Wei was scrolling through the Federal Reserve website, her expression shifting from confusion to shock. It says here you manage a team of 200 economists and analysts. That you advise the Federal Reserve Board on systemic risk. That you've testified before Congress 14 times. 15 actually. I testified to the Senate Banking Committee last month. The call you just took, Uncle James said slowly. That was about the financial crisis. The one that's all over the news right now. Yes. Chairman Powell needed me to activate our emergency stabilization protocols. Chairman Powell, Robert repeated. Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, called you personally. He's technically my boss, so yes, he calls me when there are crises that fall under my directorate. Mike had sat down heavily in a patio chair. The cryptocurrency collapse. The emergency lending. That was you. That was my team. I just led the response and designed the intervention strategy. How much, he asked faintly. How much emergency lending did you authorize? The details are confidential, but the public announcement mentioned the scale of the facilities we activated. Linda was reading her phone. This article says the Fed authorized up to $400 billion in emergency lending. Did you personally authorize that? I developed the recommendation. Chairman Powell and the Federal Reserve Board authorized it. But yes, the plan was mine. There was absolute silence on the patio. 50-plus relatives all staring at me. You control $400 billion, Mike said, his voice barely a whisper. I don't control it. I have the authority to recommend its deployment when financial stability is threatened. There's a significant difference. Sarah, my mother said, and she was crying now. Why didn't you tell us? I tried. 7 years ago at Christmas I said I'd been appointed as a director at the Federal Reserve. Everyone was talking about Linda's promotion to partner and Dad said, "That's nice, dear," and changed the subject. At Thanksgiving 3 years ago I mentioned testifying to Congress about systemic risk, and Mike said it was cute that I was interested in economics. Last summer I talked about coordinating with the European Central Bank on banking regulations, and Robert asked if that was something I'd read about online. But you never corrected us when we called you a bank teller, Linda said. I did. Multiple times. You didn't listen. Eventually I realized that you'd decided who I was and what I did and nothing I said would change that. So I stopped trying. Robert was reading through my official Federal Reserve biography, his hands shaking. MIT. PhD in Economics. Dissertation on Systemic Financial Risk and Contagion Models. Published in the American Economic Review. Winner of the Fisher-Black Prize for the Best Financial Economist Under 40. He looked up. You're one of the leading financial economists in the world. Some people think so, yes. The Fisher-Black Prize, Uncle James said. I know what that is. That's like the Nobel Prize for Young Economists. Sarah, that's incredible. It was an honor to receive it. Aunt Wei had tears streaming down her face. All those times we pitied you. All those times we offered to help you find a better job. And you were preventing financial crises. You were literally keeping the global economy from collapsing. That's a bit dramatic, but financial stability is important work, yes. How much do you make? Mike asked suddenly, then immediately looked embarrassed. Sorry, that's rude. I bragged about my dealerships to someone who... Federal Reserve directors' salaries are public record. You can look it up if you're curious. But it's not about the money. It's about the work. Linda was still reading, scrolling through article after article. There's a profile of you in The Economist. It calls you the quiet guardian of American financial stability. It says you've been instrumental in preventing 3 potential banking crises since your appointment. The press is sometimes overly generous. There's a quote here from a Harvard professor. Director Chen is quite possibly the most important person in American finance that most people have never heard of. She looked at me with something like awe. Why haven't we heard of you? Because I do my job well. When financial stability works properly, it's invisible. You only hear about it when something goes wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from Chairman Powell. Markets are stabilizing. Your plan is working. Well done. I smiled and put my phone away. That smile, Robert said quietly. I've never seen you smile like that. It's been a good day. We prevented something very bad from happening. And we spent it mocking you, he said, his voice breaking. We spent it telling you that you'd failed, that you needed our help, that you'd wasted your potential. And you just finished saving the financial system. To be fair, the day isn't over. We still have implementation to monitor. Sarah, my mother said, standing up and walking over to me. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You achieved something extraordinary and I didn't even know. I was embarrassed by my own daughter, and I should have been bursting with pride. Mom. No, let me say this. You're brilliant. You're accomplished. You're doing work that matters. Work that affects millions of people's lives. And instead of celebrating that, I offered to help you get a management position at a bank branch. She hugged me tightly. I'm so ashamed. You didn't know. I should have known. I should have listened. I should have paid attention to my own daughter's life instead of assuming I understood it. One by one, my relatives began to process the reality. The conversations around the patio shifted from shock to embarrassment to something like awe. Mike approached me, looking genuinely humbled for the first time I could remember. Sarah, I'm sorry. I've been a complete ass. I bragged about car dealerships to someone who literally manages the stability of the U.S. banking system. I feel like an idiot. Your work is important too, Mike. People need cars. But I didn't need to be such a jerk about it. I didn't need to constantly put you down to make myself feel important. No, I agreed. You didn't. He nodded, accepting the rebuke. For what it's worth, I'm impressed. Really impressed. And sorry. Robert had pulled up a video on his phone. Footage of me testifying before Congress about banking regulations. I've seen this before, he said wonderingly. When it was on C-SPAN. I watched you testify about financial stability measures and I thought, that economist is really sharp. I had no idea it was my sister. Would it have mattered? What? If you'd known it was me, would you have been proud? Or would you have still assumed I must be exaggerating or that someone else was doing the real work? He thought about that. I honestly don't know. And that's shameful. Linda was reading through the comments on a financial news article about the Fed's emergency action. All these economists and bankers praising Director Chen's decisive action. They're talking about you. They respect you. And I've been offering you career advice like you're a struggling entry-level employee. Your intentions were good. My intentions were condescending. There's a difference. She set down her phone. Sarah, I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to undo 7 years of dismissiveness and mockery. You can't undo it. You can only learn from it. Meaning maybe next time you ask instead of assume. Maybe you listen instead of lecturing. Maybe you consider that people might be more than they appear. She nodded slowly. That's fair. That's more than fair. The rest of the barbecue passed in a blur. Instead of being the pitted underachiever, I suddenly became the center of attention. But this time with respect instead of condescension. People asked genuine questions about my work. They listened to my answers. They treated me like an accomplished professional instead of a failure who needed help. Felt strange. And long overdue. As the evening wound down, Uncle Tom pulled me aside. Sarah, I owe you an apology too. I've been hosting these gatherings for 20 years, and I've watched everyone celebrate your siblings' successes while ignoring yours. I should have said something. I should have made sure people understood what you'd accomplished. It's not your responsibility. Maybe not. But I'm family too and I let you down. He paused. For what it's worth, your father would have been so proud. He always said you were the smartest of all the Chen kids. Looks like he was right. My father had passed away when I was in graduate school before my career had really begun. The mention of him hit harder than I expected. Thanks, Uncle Tom. That means a lot. As I drove home to my apartment in Georgetown, my phone buzzed with messages from various relatives. Apologies, questions, expressions of admiration. I'd respond to them eventually. But right now I had more important things to focus on. The markets would open in less than 48 hours, and I needed to make sure our stabilization measures held. Because that was the thing about financial stability work. It never really stopped. There was always another crisis brewing, another risk to assess, another potential disaster to prevent. My family had spent 7 years thinking I was a bank teller, feeling sorry for me, offering to help me find a better path. They'd been wrong. About all of it. But in a strange way, their underestimation had been freeing. It meant I never had to perform for them, never had to justify my choices, never had to compete with my siblings for approval. I just quietly built a career that mattered. A career that affected millions of people's lives, that kept the financial system stable, that prevented the kind of economic catastrophes that could devastate entire nations. And if it took a global financial crisis for my family to notice, well, that said more about them than it ever did about me. My phone buzzed with one final message, this one from Chairman Powell. Markets are holding steady. Your team did exceptional work today. Take tomorrow off, you've earned it. I smiled and put my phone away. Take tomorrow off. As if preventing financial crises followed a schedule. But I appreciated the thought. Director Sarah Chin, Federal Reserve System. Not a bank teller. Not a failure. Not someone who needed help finding her way. Just someone who'd quietly become one of the most important financial policymakers in the world. And that was enough.